In the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for another Thunder Thursday. Easy for me to say. I'm Jenny Carlson here with our Thunder coverage team. Barry Trammell, columnist. Eric Horn, Thunder beat writer. Brett Dawson, Thunder beat writer. It's the off season, so the gang's all here. Because what else do we have to do? But there's obviously a lot to talk about. Let's start with Russell Westbrook's contract, you guys, and the extension. You know, with this collective bargaining agreement and the new details, it builds in some opportunities for clubs as it relates to guys that they've drafted, guys like Russell Westbrook and developed. Bigger money, longer term deals. Brett, if Russell Westbrook does not do an extension, he's signed with the Thunder through this next season. If he doesn't do an extension, red flag, not a red flag, what should we think of that?
Well, I don't know that it's a red flag, but the Thunder's going to have a sense of where he is. You know, you'd like to have that by draft night. Theoretically, you won't. That's not going to happen. They can't really talk to him until July 1st. But by the trade deadline next year, you've got to have a sense of it. You have to have a sense of where he is in this process. If he hasn't signed that contract extension, have you done enough during the course of the year to make him think he needs to? You can't get past the trade deadline next year without signing Russell Westbrook to that contract, because then you run into the scenario, you know, you run the risk of having happened to you what already happened, which is you lose a great star player for nothing.
Yeah. Is there a chance that Russell Westbrook, Eric, actually lets the Thunder know enough where he stands on things? I mean, maybe Durant did that before he became a free agent. I don't know, but they need to really have a sense of this. Like Brett said, is Russell Westbrook going to be open to letting the Thunder know that?
I'm not sure, but you know, the Thunder does have the advantage of at least having one more year of guaranteed money for Russell Westbrook. Now, it's a dangerous proposition to go into that final year without some, you know, some solid ground in terms of an extension, but they do have that year, and Russell Westbrook did show them that you know, last season with the extension that he signed last year, the renegotiation, that he was willing to go in for this thing at least, you know, with an extended year and then a full year in 17-18 to give the Thunder a little bit more time to build this thing around them. So, you know, a full offseason for the Thunder being able to build around Russell Westbrook would be ideal. You know, they're not going to trade him this summer. I don't think that's in the agenda at all. But, you know, as Brett said, it's going to be something that's going to be interesting to see if he doesn't sign this extension, because he can do it in the next offseason as well. But is the Thunder going to be willing to wait and risk another Kevin Durant situation if he doesn't sign the extension this summer?
Where you get nothing in return. And
can't have that happen again. Can't.
Yeah, I think it is a red flag if he doesn't sign this summer, because, yeah, he can sign next summer, but if he doesn't sign this summer, it's, you know, it's almost like a sneak peek for the Thunder. You get to sort of see what it's going to be like, and if he's not going to sign now, what are the incentives that would make him change and sign next summer? Just more deals, better roster enhancement, maybe. But to me, and I'm not saying what the Thunder should do, it's a very difficult decision. But I think if Russell Westbrook does not sign that contract extension this summer, it is a red flag, and the Thunder has to go into the mode of what's our plan.
And it's going to be even more difficult if he doesn't re-sign, because the Thunder's not going to want to go ahead and trade him this offseason, because they're going to want that full offseason to build around him and see what they can do with a full season with Westbrook as the focal point. But at the same time, it's going to be harder to offload him if they did want to trade him at the trade deadline. That's just not a time where, you know, a lot of the big pieces get moved. It's a rare occasion that those guys really get moved, particularly a guy like Russell Westbrook. So to have a full offseason to be able to you know, get some deals going, maybe a draft day deal or something like that would be more advantageous to the Thunder. That's just something that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's such a tough spot. Barry said it right, you know, Brett, because the way Sam Presti is, the moves, you know, you just don't know the roster now. I mean, it's likely to look vastly different, which we're going to get into this talk of Presti at his exit interview with the media earlier this week, where he talked about continuity. But, Brett, I think if you're in Westbrook's position, you have to know that that roster is going to look vastly different, likely by the opener for the season. And so is it going to look vastly better? I mean, you hope, but if you're in his position, you don't know.
No, and that's why Russell Westbrook has to wait too. He's got to make the best decision for him. It's not just the money. The Thunder's going to be able to offer more money, more years than anybody else. It's not just about that. He's got to figure some other things out. I mean, he's got to figure out whether he thinks they can win here, and this offseason is going to be really telling, and so he doesn't know what's going to happen this offseason yet. That's very important. Can they build a roster with what they have, which is not really a lot to work with? They don't have a lot of assets, and they don't have free agent money. They can't go out and make a big splash in free agency with the cap space or lack thereof that they have. So he's got to get a better feel for what they're going to have around him. I'm sure there are going to be some conversations with Sam Presti, and he's also got some other things to think about. He's going to be a father. He has to think about where he wants to live, where he wants the first few years of his child's life to be during the season, those sorts of things. He's got a lot to decide, and so it's a lot to ask of Russell Westbrook to know right now what he wants to do.
Yeah, I mentioned that word continuity, guys. I doubt Sam Presti is sitting around, crafting his continuity speech thinking, yeah, I think I want to trade Russell Westbrook. I don't think that's part of the continuity talk, Barry, that he's thinking about. I mean, the last thing he wants to do is trade Russell Westbrook.
Well, it's the nuclear option, and that's the last thing he wants to do. I shouldn't say that. It's the second to last thing he wants to do. The last thing he wants to do is watch Russell Westbrook right off into the sunset the way Kevin Durant did last summer. So it's a difficult position to be in if you're Sam Presti. Eric's right. If you're going to trade Russell Westbrook, I sort of think you have to do it this summer, not at the trade deadline. You'd get a lot more from him. So it's just a very difficult situation for the Thunder to be in. I do think that we've been pessimistic for the last 4 or 5 minutes because we've been talking about what if he doesn't sign. I think there's a good chance he will sign. So I mean, I'm not trying to paint a bad picture. I'm just saying if he doesn't, these are the factors.
Yeah, and obviously we don't know. I mean, he could very well be saying, yeah, I absolutely want to do this, and it's just a matter of July 1st getting here. That's the date that Sam Presti and his folks can start talking about that extension. But continuity, I mentioned a minute ago, was such a buzzword, Eric, during Sam Presti's interview time with the media, almost an hour on Monday this week. And I think that sent off a lot of alarm bells amongst fans because they looked at this roster, they saw the flaws, especially exacerbated in the playoffs, and thought, continuity, the last thing this franchise needs is continuity. What are we to make of all this continuity talk, Eric?
It's Sam towing the line. He has to say the right things. He can't just go out and say we're going to trade everybody on the roster except Russell Westbrook. But you can still make moves and have different guys come in and still keep a core of players. I remember Sam Presti, last year saying that he included Serge Ibaka in that core at the beginning of the season. And next thing you know, Serge is on the first thing smoking at the draft night. So. Yeah. These things can change. It's fluid. You don't know if a guy like Andre Robertson is going to be here, even though you would consider him part of the core because he's one of the longest tenured guys in the rotation on the current roster. Steven Adams and Victor Oladipo, you'd expect them to be a part of this core because they signed those extensions earlier this season. But continuity is one of those things where you can still keep 3 or 4 guys and see the stars around them change. I mean stars as in, these guys are the sun and stars around them, not that like Jeremy Grant or Domantas Sabonis is a star. The pieces are going to change. There's going to be a lot of mixed matching and trades and people going in and out. And Nick Collison's contract is up. He might be out the door. So I wouldn't get too caught up on continuity as in everybody's coming back. It's just a matter of a few guys coming back to keep that core of what the Thunder wants to do going forward.
Brett, is this a matter of Sam Presti saying, here's what we can control. We can control getting these guys in the gym. We can control trying to get them better. We can't control who's going to be willing to wheel and deal with us. Is that why he was leaning towards continuity as opposed to overhaul?
Well, I think that's part of it. Another part of it is, as I've said, if you put your house up for sale and you put it up for sale yourself and somebody comes to view it, you're not going to say, I got to sell this house. Get rid of this thing for me.
Yeah.
You're going to tell the people what's so great about it. And so he's doing a couple of things. One, you don't want to dump on anybody's value as you're going into the trade market. So you're not going to say, we really need to move some pieces and get better, because that's just going to reduce the trade value of the pieces that you have. The other thing is, if you can't make those moves, as you say, they can't control who's going to want Enes Kanter or who's going to want whatever piece they might be willing to deal. If you can't move those pieces, you can't come back in October with those same guys having sat there in May saying we need to move this guy to get better here. That's just not going to work. So you got to be, Sam Presti's doing it exactly the right way. He's playing it straight down the middle, but I think we got a sense of what he means, and I think Eric's right. Russell Westbrook's going to be here. Steven Adams is going to be here, barring something really unforeseen. But these pieces around it are going to change.
Well, and Barry, I mean, what Brett said about sort of wanting to enhance, if you will, the trade value of some of these guys. I mean, we heard Sam Presti talking about how he foresees Enes Kanter one day being a three-point shooter. I mean, he projected some of these guys in ways during that exit interview that I thought, That's a real good sales job there, Mr. Presti.
Yeah, and I think he even mentioned defensive improvement by Ennis, which is up for debate as well. But it's clear that Sam's not plans to go into next season with basically the same roster. I mean, that's just silly. You don't do that even when everything's going great and everybody's under contract. So these guys, the Thunder's going to look different. How different? It's not going to be drastic. It's not going to be the makeover we saw from last season. When literally, more than half the rotation was gone with Durant, Ibaka, Waiters, all those guys gone. But this year, what's it going to look like? It could be a significant, could be small change. I think most fans are hoping for significant change, but it wouldn't take a significant roster overhaul to improve. Sam's right when he says we're going to get better just by osmosis, just by Steven Adams, Victor Oladipo, Andre Robertson, Sabonis, all these Abrinas, McDermott, all these young guys just getting naturally better. That will happen. He's right about that. That's not a snow job. I mean, that's going to happen. What he's got to decide is who stays and who goes.
Yeah, and Barry, I mean, you've talked about this in our office in a variety of spots, but improvement amongst those top guys, amongst the guys like Adams and Oladipo who do have those long-term deals and do have great potential, that's where they can really make some hay as a franchise, is get these guys to continue to improve.
Yeah, Steven Adams he's a defensive player first and foremost, so his improvement is not going to be as apparent to most people if you ever have to play without him and watch the other team just make pick and roll a layup line, then you'll realize what he's good at. But somebody like Victor Oladipo, I think we saw the improvement. He's better in Oklahoma City than he was in Orlando. I think he's going to be better year 2 in Oklahoma City than he was year 1 in Oklahoma City. His shooting improved. He was a really solid player. I think he's got a fairly high ceiling.
Yeah, guys, I did our live chat today, and I think you guys, maybe save Barry, have done live chats this week and gotten asked questions, a lot of Thunder stuff. And somebody asked me who I thought the starting 5 would be come the opening night. And I said, well, short of Russell Westbrook, I'm not sure I can say with certainty that I think anybody else in particular is going to be there. But maybe that next guy that, when you talk about if the right trade came along, you could see Adams going. You could see Oladipo going. But Oladipo is maybe the one guy outside of Westbrook. He's that two-way wing. Everybody wants the two-way wings. Eric, he seems like, I'm not saying they're trading either of those guys, Adams or Oladipo, but Oladipo, I know he was disappointing in the playoffs, but he seems like the type of guy that you want to keep, you want to develop, and see what he can do year 2, year 3, year 4.
Yeah, and everyone's been clamoring for that guy since Thabo Sefolosha left. Even when Thabo Sefolosha was here, everyone was clamoring for that, that two-way wing, a guy who can go get his own points, a guy who can hit a three-pointer, and also defend on the perimeter, and Victor Oladipo is that guy. So if you're automatically saying, okay, let's ship him out just because his number's going up in terms of his contract, that doesn't seem to make any sense. That's a guy you want to keep in a league that's going from the inside to out. Victor Oladipo is a valuable commodity, and he's a guy who'd be coveted by several teams out there right now.
What about, we've talked about Enes Kanter a variety of ways, Brett. He seems like, and again, we've probably talked about this as much as anything on Thunder Thursday this year, seems like the most likely trade piece on the Thunder. What makes sense when you think about how he could be packaged, who might be looking for an Enes Kanter? Obviously, extremely skilled offensively, questions defensively, huge contract. Are there teams that make sense when you think about where he could land?
There are. I mean, there are certainly some teams who are without offensive low post scoring, and that's, even though that's become less important in the NBA, it's still a thing that if you have a guy who's elite at it, and he is elite, he's one of the best low post scorers in the league, there are going to be some people who have some interest. The trick is finding somebody who's willing to part with wing help, because that's what you want in the NBA right now. So you got to find a team that's got a surplus and also needs a scorer in the post. That's going to be hard to find. But look at a team like Sacramento, having traded DeMarcus Cousins, now no longer has that presence in the post. That's a team that really could use somebody to score. The Knicks probably could use somebody to score. Those are teams that need help on the block. Do they have the wing pieces you need? Denver has some of those. They got a lot of pieces. Denver doesn't really need an Enes Kanter. So that's going to be the tricky thing to navigate, and that's why you can't go into the offseason saying Enes Kanter is going to be gone, because you got to find the trade. They're not going to move him to move him. He's a really good low post scorer. He's one of the best offensive rebounders in the league. He gives you production off the bench. So they're not going to move him for the sake of moving him.
The problem with Enes Kanter is, with the way that the money's being allocated now to free agents, big guys aren't getting paid that much anymore in terms of the, the 17, 18, $20 million contracts. The Lakers made a mistake last season in signing a guy like Timofey Mozgov. Enes Kanter would have been a great guy for them to have. But do you want to take back a Timofey Mozgov if you're the Thunder? I mean, that's the problem. And the teams that would really value from having an Enes Kanter, a guy that they can throw out there in limited minutes and really punish another team, are teams that are contenders that might be capped out. A team like, say, like a Golden State or a Cleveland that could use him in spurts the way that the Thunder does to really punish teams on the inside. So it's going to be difficult to find a suitor for a guy like Enes Kanter because of the way that the league's going now. They're paying that money to perimeter guys as opposed to big guys now. And the Thunder had to do what they had to do at the time when it came to Enes Kanter. They had to match that offer. They had a team they were building around Kevin Durant. But now it's almost like Enes Kanter is a luxury piece in today's NBA.
Yeah, and the Thunder right now on their roster is not, they really can't afford luxuries. I think that's the bottom line. But Barry, I'll go back to what Brett said. Finding teams that are willing to talk about trades, that have something you want. I think that's something we have to keep coming back to. Are there pieces out there that you see as possibilities, whether it's Kanter or someone else, as you think about possible trade scenarios out there?
I think the Thunder, if they're going to trade Enes Kanter, may have to lower their sights. Brett's right. It's going to be tough to find a good wing that somebody will send here for Enes Kanter. That's why I think if Sam decides to pull the trigger on a trade, I think he might have to go the route of the backup point guard. To me, that's a fairly significant need. Unlike two-way wings or even sometimes one-way wings, backup point guards are fairly readily available. Most teams have one. Some teams have two good backup point guards. You can find those guys. So the Thunder might be able to get a really good one for Enes Kanter. That might be what they have to go and try to get that extra wing help through other measures.
Guys, as we're thinking about the next sort of big moving, shaking day in the NBA, that's obviously draft day. Last year, with the big trade that the Thunder made, it sort of put in the background a little bit the actual draft, which, now the Thunder has the 21st pick. They're going to actually have a set draft spot. Let's talk about that for a second. There's a chance, obviously, that a deal gets done. They're no longer in that spot. But at 21, is there a guy, I'll open this up to whoever, is there a guy, a name that you think will be there that might be a good option for the Thunder?
There are a few guys that I have in mind. One of them who I don't think is going to be available at that spot. He's coming off of a knee injury at Indiana. His name's OG. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. So there you go, Anunoby.
I can't believe you didn't know. You're the guy that always knows how to say the names. I've been
tracking this guy. This time I messed up. I've been tracking this guy for about a year and a half now. He's that athletic wing type player who brings a little bit of that 3-and-D aspect to the NBA. He spent 2 years at Indiana. You'd obviously have that relationship with Oladipo if he came to the team. I don't think they never played together, but they still have the Indiana connection. He's a guy who had his season cut short at Indiana with a knee injury. So I think that he's still going to be in that lottery range. He's seen his stock kind of go up because of the size and versatility he brings. He's around 6'8", 230, kind of like a better version of Josh Houston, essentially, in terms of the size and the skill set. And he's supposed to be a hellacious defender, too. So that's a guy who I think maybe if he were to fall to the Thunder, that would be an ideal landing spot for him. I've seen draft boards where you got a guy like Duke's Luke Kennard, who's a 6'6", kind of combo guard. He's handled a little bit of point for Duke this season because the Duke didn't really have a viable point guard to go to, but he's a lefty, lights-out shooter. He's hit some big shots for Duke this year. I wonder in terms of if he would take minutes away from an Alex Abrines or Doug McDermott, but at the same time, you can never have enough shooters in today's NBA. So I think he might be a viable option for the Thunder. Not that I've heard anything in regard to him, but those are kind of the guys that you would think would be possible wing options at 21. And this is a really deep draft. Yeah. You might even get one of the top point guards to fall if something does happen. And if that does, the Thunder should scoop him up and just pair him with a dynamic guy like Russell Westbrook. And who knows, the Thunder could go back up point guard at 21. I mean, we've seen them reach for guys before like Mitch McGary, who wasn't supposed to be a guy drafted at 21. What if the Thunder likes Jalen Evans out of Oklahoma State enough to go ahead and pick him there? Jawan, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. You got his name.
Yeah, I think, the other thing about that draft, we know the Thunder will pick 21st. They are going to take that pick. They can't trade it before the draft. Now, could they pick for somebody else? Sure. Could there be a movement there? Could a guy, they don't need a power forward, but a guy a lot of people talk about being in that range is like a Bam Adebayo from Kentucky. That's a guy who some teams lower down might be interested in, so maybe they want to make a move after the Thunder draft somebody. That would be a possibility. I wonder a little bit with the Thunder, as Sam Presti has pointed out, the third youngest team in franchise history, the youngest team to make the playoffs this year. Do they need another rookie? Is it a situation where once they've traded that piece, once they've drafted that piece, they might look to trade it? Or is this a situation where, too, you might look at a stash, a guy like Abrinas, who you take now, and maybe can help you somewhere down the road?
Yeah, I think shooters, that to me is the premium. And if there's a shooter there, Barry, I'm not saying you 100% go. I think you still have to look best available, but you don't want to draft a center, for crying out loud. But shooters are premium. Get them, and then I would say figure it out.
The Thunder is pretty well stacked inside. So to me, it's either a wing or a point guard. Who it is, I have no idea. Brett's right, though. To me, it's perfectly conceivable that we could have what we had last year, which is, Sabonis is picked at 11th by Orlando, and we don't think anything about it. And then a few minutes later, we realize, hey, it was the Thunder that just drafted Domantas Sabonis, and there's this huge trade. I can see the same thing happening this year.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let me remind folks you're watching Thunder Thursday. Here we're talking all things Thunder. It may be the offseason, but lots going on as we talk about the future of this roster, the future of this franchise. And guys, before we get out of here, let's talk about a couple guys that are already on this roster. Andre Robertson, Brett and Eric, you guys are doing the Thunder Player a Day in the month of May, as we like to term it, although sometimes, as we know in the past, it actually becomes the month of June or whenever we get around to it and the Thunder's done with the playoffs. In this case, it is May. We had a look today at Andre Robertson and what his value is. Eric, you were the author of that, I believe, if I am remembering right.
Correct.
My morning coffee had kicked in when I read that. But what's a reasonable number? We talked a little bit about this last week, but as we've thought more, what's your feeling about a reasonable number as it relates to contract for Andre Robertson?
Looking at some of the contracts that some of these players that play small forward have gotten in the past few years, I think in that $4 to $40 million range would probably be reasonable for Andre Robertson. Something similar to what a guy like Mo Harkless got from Portland a year ago. And granted, Andre Robertson's a better defender than Mo Harkless, but when you're looking in terms of like how they shoot the three, their points per game average, defensive impact, that's kind of a comparable range as to where Andre Robertson would fit. We talked about a guy like Solomon Hill who got signed by the Pelicans. He received 11.2 last year. I think that's probably a little much for Andre Robertson, but with the salary cap going up again to $101 million this offseason, somebody's going to throw something out there that's probably going to be more than you'd expect for an Andre Robertson. He's a guy who can play off the floor. We saw that in the Houston series. He's a terrible free throw shooter. He's regressed as a shooter. His defense is all world. He's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. But how much are you willing to pay for a player who is essentially 1.5-sided? I wouldn't say he's completely one-sided because he can make those intelligent cuts. Billy Donovan's put him in some good positions to get some offense out of it at times, but he's just going to be limited, and there are going to be times where you can hide a guy on him the way that the Rockets did with James Harden, where basically he can just rove and not even pay attention to Andre Robertson in the corner. Is that something you're willing to pay $12 to $15 million for? I don't know if there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be willing to do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. One of many, obviously, that Sam Presti is facing, Brett. But, you talk about, Barry said earlier, when Steven Adams is not out there, suddenly you see the conga line on the pick and roll to the basket. Is it the same situation that is Josh Huestis ready to be a defensive stopper? Is there an obvious fill-in? Because I hate to tell you, but Russell Westbrook's got a lot on his plate offensively, and he may do some spot duty defensively, but he's not stopping James Harden. So what are the options here if you're in Sam Presti's shoes?
Well, the first thing you want is you want Robertson back, and you'd like to get that done without anybody making him an offer sheet. You'd like to get it signed as soon as you can and not let him venture out too much. We'll see if that happens. if that were to happen in the scenario that he doesn't come back, you got to go out and find another piece probably. We talked about Thabo Sefolosha on the podcast yesterday. Why not bring him back? But there, you got to find somebody else to fill in that hole. But when Kevin Durant left, you couldn't replace what Kevin Durant did offensively. It just doesn't work. Robertson is kind of the same way defensively. You wouldn't be able to be the exact same team. What you probably do is you'd look at a shift in focus again, and that would have to be a team that would have to score more by necessity. You remove Andre Robertson, you're probably going to replace him with a better offensive player, so maybe that's a little more Alex Abrinas and a little more Doug McDermott. There's a trade-off there. Obviously, defensively, those guys aren't great, but it gives you some more shooting on the floor. You'd have to tweak the way you play a little bit.
Barry, we were talking in the office before we came on here. Is there an incentive to give Andre Robertson to work on free throws, to work on outside shooting? I said offer him 8 and then say if you make 2/3 of your free throws, you get 10 a year. You said that's the silliest idea of all time.
Well, you know I love you, Jacko, but that's the most absurd thing I've ever seen. We're talking about a guy who clearly has a mental block, who goes to the foul line and can't shoot better than a 4th grader. And so let's put more pressure on him, saying, hey, here's a $2 million foul shot, son. No, I don't know. The Thunder needs a sports psychologist on staff. If they have one, they need a new one. It's clearly a mental block, and that's what this summer needs to be about for Andre Robertson, whether he's a Thunder or a Knick or a Celtic, wherever he's at. Get over that mental block. He clearly can make foul shots at a decent rate. He was 70% in college. He was 64, 66 his last season, I think. So he's shown that he's capable, but that was absurd. You remember the old NBA absurd rule, 3 to make 2? With Andre Robertson, you go about 12 to make 2, and he may not get there. So he's got to beat that. Whether he's here, whether he's elsewhere, he's in the NBA. He's a valuable player. He's a really good player. He helps teams win. But when he goes to the line, he helps teams lose.
Coming out the playoffs, you can go 21 to make 2.
Ouch.
I mean, look, numbers.
It's reality.
The numbers don't lie.
Numbers don't lie.
I mean,
He'd have gotten that.
One more thing.
3 out of 20.
One more thing to add to the Andre Robertson free agency thing. I think this might end up being something that comes closer to a Dion Waiters situation we saw last year, as opposed to a guy like Solomon Hill getting an exorbitant offer or Timofey Mozgov getting some crazy offer you'd never expect. And here's why. Last year, before I mentioned that the salary cap was going up to $101 million, but it's only going up $7 million as opposed to last year where it went from 70 to 94, and there was this massive $24 million spike, and these teams had all this cash and they didn't know what to do with it. They were just freaking out. Oh, Timothy Mozgov, you have some. Oh, Solomon Hill, you want some too. Allen Crabbe. They're just throwing this money around because they just had $24 million to spend. That's like almost getting another max free agent. So this year, when you're going from 94.1 to 101, it's a lot less money on the table. Teams are probably going to be a little bit more conservative than they were last year in free agency because the cap number isn't as drastic as it was in 2016.
I also think there's been a little bit of kickback on those contracts. I think there's been a little bit of thought of maybe that was a mistake. Maybe you don't have to spend the money just because you have it. And so I think you'll see some people were saying last year, well, that's not really a bad deal under the new cap. Well, it's kind of a bad deal. If you offer Solomon Hill $11 or $12 million, that's still not a great deal. The Timofey Mozgov deal, still a bad deal. And so I think you'll see fewer teams willing to do that this year.
It's still a bad deal if you sign Kyle Singler to $25 million and you're lighting $5 million on fire a year. It's still a bad deal.
I'd take it, by the way, even lit on fire.
Yeah,
I'd tamp it out.
Yeah, I'd throw some water on it and then see if we can tape the bills back together. But yeah, as Brett said, there's going to be some tempered spending, I think, in terms of free agent. Now, there's still going to be some crazy spending. Now, you're going to see a deal that's going to be wild. Somebody's going to get something that you're just not expecting because everybody's always looking to upgrade somehow in free agency, and they panic. But I don't think it's going to be as crazy as it was last year with the massive spike. Okay,
a couple more things. We talk about getting paid and getting paid like a star. A couple guys on this roster who are about to get paid like stars, Oladipo and Adams, they were still under those rookie deals this year, guys, but they're about to get that big jump. Barry, how important are these guys? We talked a little bit about their improvement earlier, but now the money's there. You know, we were joking about Andre and his money and the incentives, but these guys, it's for real. It's in their contract. How important for them to play like guys that are getting paid these big numbers?
Well, I mean, it's imperative to the Thunder's success. You can't build a roster around around two guys making collectively $44 million a year, $45 million a year, and still need guys to play better than them. I mean, they got to pull their weight. They've got to be the second and third best players on this team. And I think they will. I mean, they were this year. I think they will be next year. They need to be better. But there's every reason to think they will. They're still young guys. They're 23. They're going to be 24 and 25 next season. So I think they will get better, but they have to. If they don't, then the Thunder immediate future is in bad shape.
You know, this is the first time either of these guys have had this type of money, and that added aspect to things. For both of them, this last season was a big change. I mean, Oladipo, for obvious reasons, coming to a different team. But I contend that with Serge leaving and the expectation on Adams, he might have seen as much change as anyone on that Thunder roster. I mean, obviously you don't want to be in last year's situation with this money kicking in, but Eric, these guys have to at least be in a better place to know what they need to do, how they need to play, so that is at least not an unknown to them.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see, you know, with the roster change, how these guys adjust to the new players they might be playing next to. You know, Steven Adams had to go from, you know, covering for a rookie for a majority of the season to getting Taj Gibson next to him. And we saw them look successful together at the close of the season and into the playoffs. Is the Thunder going to bring back Taj Gibson to kind of fortify that front line along with Steven Adams? Steven Adams has admitted to us before, you know, it was easy playing next to Serge Ibaka for so many years coming into the league because Serge Ibaka erased a lot of mistakes. Mm-hmm. Now Steven Adams is having to be the guy that erases a lot of mistakes, so it's going to help him to have a guy like Taj Gibson perhaps come back and help him in terms of the interior defense. Whereas, you know, Steven Adams was having to cover for Domantas Sabonis, having troubles that he had in terms of his defense. And even though Domantas Sabonis was 20 years old and he played relatively well for his age and experience, it was still Steven Adams having to be that anchor. So are the Thunder going to be able to put guys around Steven Adams to lessen the load on him in terms of his defensive coverages?
Are these guys the key, Brett, in your mind, with their salaries, their experience, their potential? Obviously, Westbrook carries the lion's share, but are these two guys really the key to what we're going to see this next season and maybe beyond?
Well, they're certainly among the keys. We'll see what happens with trades and who else is here, but among the guys who are going to be back, absolutely. You know, Oladipo played really well. He had a good year. I think there's some people a little bit disappointed, and I think fairly disappointed about the way he was used sometimes, about the fact that he wasn't really much of a viable point guard option. He wasn't as much of a playmaker, maybe as people thought he could be. Maybe his role changes again. Maybe there's some, you know, maybe there's a future where Alex Abrinas is a starter and Victor Oladipo comes off the bench and does some of those things that we think he's capable of doing. Whatever the role they're in, though, those guys are the, you know, Sam Presti said the other day, they've got to depend less on Russell Westbrook. And Westbrook wants to be depended on. He wants the ball in his hands. He wants to be a playmaker. That's who and what he is. But he needs help, and it's going to be hard. As we said, they can't just go out and sign Blake Griffin. They can't go out and sign Gordon Hayward. So if they're going to get him help, the most likely candidates right now are those two guys.
All right, last question, guys. We talked a lot about improvement. We've talked about player development in the offseason. Player we're most interested in seeing from now to next year. Barry, who is it for you?
It's a guy that we're writing about for tomorrow's paper, who after I did the report card, did a lot of investigating. I'm really excited about Domantas Sabonis. After I looked at the numbers, this guy was 20 years old, and he played pretty dang well for a 20-year-old. I think his upside is high. I think he's going to be a really good player in the NBA.
All right, guys. Eric?
I might steal Brett's, but actually, you know what? I'm not going to steal yours.
So we're going to do this again. You're going to take one that you think I'm not going to take, and it's going to be the one I was going to take.
You're going to take. Okay, I was going to take Alex Abrinas, but I'm going to take Jeremy Grant.
That's exactly what I did.
Yes!
I thought I'm going to take Jeremy Grant because Eric will take Alex Abrinas.
Exactly. I'm going to take Jeremy Grant because this was a guy that, you know, we saw progress from the beginning of the year to the end in terms of his body control on drives. He has no mid-range game to speak of. If he can get anything in the mid-range, whether it's a floater or some kind of move in the mid-range where it's a pull-up jumper, which might not happen because he's kind of got a clunky release. If he can get a floater, something like that, or some work in the post, he could be a really devastating option for them in terms of, you know, they're playing their small ball lineups. He can play at the 5. He can play at the 4. We've already seen him be able to stretch his game out and hit the 3 from the corners. I think he shot about 36 or 37% from 3. He's 22, 23 years old. a lot of upside with Jeremy Grant, and we know he can dunk the hell out of the ball. That's not a question. I'd even like to see him get involved in the pick and roll situation where he's rolling to the rim and Russell Westbrook throws him the lob a la Steven Adams, because we know he can go get it as well. There's a lot to work with Jeremy Grant. Also, kind of like a blank canvas in which you had with Serge Ibaka. He might not be as smooth at hitting the pick and pop jumper that Serge is now or was when he was with the Thunder, but Jeremy Grant's a crazy good athlete, and he's got so much upside, and I think that's a guy that you're going to see improve significantly between the end of this season and the start of the next regular season.
Abrinish?
Yeah, I'll say Abrinish now, because that was a lot of the same points I was going to make about Jeremy Grant right there. He's in a culture development now, and he's a guy who's shown that he'll work outside, too. He developed his jump shot in Philly. He's a guy to look forward to. But I think Abrinish, if you look at Alex Abrinish, he said the other day, it took me 2 or 3 weeks to get used to the way they play in the NBA because my teammates are so good, and it's fine. I was fine. But it took him longer than that. It was an adjustment. He's a 23-year-old. He's not your typical rookie. He's more like a 4-year college type guy. But you saw some things over the course of the year. You saw that he's a competitor defensively. He's not a good defender. Those are different things. Yeah. He's aggressive. He'll try to dunk on you. He's got some sort of flair and some confidence about his game that I like, but he's got a lot of room for development. He's very confident in his jump shot, but he thinks he can be a guy who puts the ball on the floor, who makes some plays for other people. So let's see if he can do those things, because that would be really helpful to this team. The one thing is, he came in and shot it really well. I won't use the phrase Russell Westbrook, that he could shoot something out of the ball, but he can. And he showed that. He shot it very well. He had some little stretches where he wasn't consistent. But you would expect the shooting, that typically for European players takes a jump in the second year. You'd expect him to be an even better shooter as he adjusts to the line a little bit more. So let's see what else he can add to his game to go along with that.
Guys, I'm interested in Oladipo after watching him at exit interviews to see how he attacks the offseason. He was clearly pretty frustrated with himself and was ready to get into the offseason. But I'm also interested to see how one Mr. Russell Westbrook improves in the offseason.
Who?
Yeah, I know. He has not ever come back and not been better. He always gets better. And so what will it be this time? What will be the encore? What will be the added piece? I thought his passing was phenomenal this year. I told Barry, I think at one point during game 3 or 4, I said, I don't think we appreciate Russell Westbrook's passing enough. Like, he was phenomenal passing the ball this year.
Jenny drives a hard bar. Jenny went on the used car lot and was like, I think that the Bentley could be better.
The Lamborghini.
Can we get a defense chant for Russell Westbrook? See if he can come back with a little bit of. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
What cheesy. One thing about Alex Abrinish. We talk about the Thunder putting guys around Russell Westbrook and how they want to play. Alex Abrinish, I think, is one of the Thunder's Russell Westbrook type players.
Yeah.
He has no conscience. He will let Russell Westbrook yell at him to shoot the flipping ball, and he'll just go, okay, I'll shoot it again. I'll shoot it again. Alex Abrinish has a very good attitude to play with Russell Westbrook, because it doesn't seem like he takes things very personal, and he's there to do his job, and he doesn't get rattled by situations. And I think he's a guy that the Thunder is going to be very confident in going forward.
We had so much Thunder to talk about, guys. We didn't even get to the playoffs. Tony Parker finishing the playoffs with an injury might be done for his career, guys. We'll have to talk more about this either on Thunder Buddies or on our next Thunder Thursday. There will be more, even though it's the offseason. Lots more Thunder to talk about. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.